back home after going to another Justin Amash event. It was not as interesting as the first one I went to, although it was more well attended. I'd say almost everybody there was a supporter. There were a couple people there who were, your classical, or not your classic, but your typical liberal, but not many. Most of the questions fielded were about Obamacare, although Amash clearly wanted to talk more about the NSA. Since his last town hall that I went to, he actually had the vote on his amendment that didn't pass but got a lot of support. It was kind of a big news event in DC at the time. So it wasn't all that terribly interesting. A lot of conservatives, a lot of anti-Obama, like I said, there's very strong feelings against Obamacare and against the government generally, so that's good, even if it's not always most well guided. What I want to talk about here, though, is actually Elysium. I took the time to go see it, and it looks good, and there's a lot of things in it that it gets right, I think. From a movie standpoint, one curious thing any science fiction buffs can answer this. Elysium is basically a space station, and there doesn't appear it's not it's not contained. It's open aired on the top. It's this big ring, and the outside of the ring is metallic, and then it's got like landscaping on it and houses. It's like real estate with trees and plants and atmosphere. But then the inside of the ring is nothing. It's clear. So at first I thought that's odd. That's just that they would build it out of clear material. Like glass. Or presumably some kind of scientifically more stable, strong material than glass, but it's not, because throughout the entire movie, spaceships just fly through this and enter the atmosphere just as they would onto the Earth, and I was wondering how is that even possible, because they don't have gravity. The point is that it's a rotating space station, so you're getting was it centripetal? Not centrifugal, one or the other force that's making it seem like there's gravity. I don't see how that would keep the air in, but whatever. That's just a little aside. It looks great. I like the way the robots look. They don't look like human facsimiles exactly, But basically, and I think other people have said this, it's pretty obvious, that the people who made Elysium are your typical really socially conscious liberals, which doesn't mean they're right, it just means that they're wrong about a lot of things. Right off the bat, it starts saying that, in the future the Earth is overpopulated, quote unquote. And if overpopulation was a problem, then we would already all be dead. We are so far past the point of finding that to be a relevant fear that it's I don't want to say it's criminal, but it's extreme dereliction in relating reality. If you still think that overpopulation, Malthus had a point when he wrote his piece in 1798 or 99 or whenever it was, very very end of the 18th century. The last 200 years has been a constant and an increasing repudiation of that orthodoxy, whatever merits there may be to it. And when overpopulation started to become this big thing, obviously Malthus was talking about it, and people had talked about it before. And up till Malthus's time, there was actually some moniker of truth to it. A higher population meant a lower standard of living. Since 1800, that has become not true in much of the world, and in a growing part of the world. And the rate of population growth is kind of accelerated. And then you got, in the 60s and 70s, kind of this population, anti-population merging with the environmentalist movement. And, you get all these predictions by people like Ron Ehrlich, that, oh man, a 5 billion person Earth will be the end of us all. We'll all live worse than the poorest coolie in Calcutta, when now we're at 7 billion. So, that's kind of thrown out there right at the beginning. Earth is kind of depicted as is basically Calcutta meets Mexico. A Latino slum. It takes place in Los Angeles, but everyone's Latino basically. And then there's Elysium, which is the way it is kind of depicted is like an HMO for super wealthy people. And I can't help but think that notions like the Free State Project or the Seasteading Institute were what the makers of this movie kind of had in mind. I'm not saying that this was designed as an attack against seasteading. I think it's just that and this is why I said the socially conscious liberals, seasteading is not something that most people are aware of at all. But within the liberal elite, who are socially conscious, who pay really close attention, the kind of people who are like Sam Sadar and Matt Damon, when they hear about ideas like seasteading, they recoil in such horror that I think that it's hard for them not to say, man, that's terrible, and then to just kind of imagine what that would be like. But then, it's interesting because Earth is clearly a police state in this. You have these police robots going around roughing people up without probable cause, surveilling everyone all the time, controlling people all the time, issuing summons and tickets all the time. And yet the problem from the point of view of the filmmakers isn't the police state, it's rich people in polo shirts having barbecues on their mansions. It's the same, and this is so typical of liberals, where we have all this police state, and I'm talking about today now, all these horrible things. This kind of, I wasn't planning to tie this together, but this comes together with when I was watching Amash today, because the two or three people there who were at least spoke out against him, could have been others who didn't say anything. They acknowledge, there's too much, the government's too big, and the wars are bad, and the NSA is bad, and spying is bad, and warrantless wiretapping is bad, and the war on drugs is bad. But then they say, well, what's the solution is we should tax the rich more. So whatever the problem with society is, even if it's explicitly the government doing it, like literally the government is doing something, the problem is rich people. Now, as the story continues, it becomes clear that there is some kind of political designation of Elysium, whereas people can be citizens of Earth and not citizens of Elysium. The only way you can get to Elysium and become a citizen, it's implied, although never explicitly stated, is with an enormous amount of money. But once you get there, you get designated a citizen of Elysium. Now, the president of Earth, this comes up because several refugees from Earth attempt to flee to Elysium, which makes zero sense. It doesn't make zero sense. It makes very little sense in the universe, because the amount of surveillance is so high that as soon as they leave Earth's atmosphere, Elysium knows that they're coming. As soon as they land, they're tracking wherever they go, and of course they catch all of them immediately. And that same totalitarian surveillance exists on Earth, and it seems very odd that then people would take such a high risk, indeed the risk of being killed on the way there, when it would entail very... Now, one thing I like about the movie that it gets right, that a lot of dystopian fiction for some reason does get right, is that whatever the level of tyranny or whatever the level of surveillance, organized crime seems to be able to get around it somehow. So, if you look at Minority Report, even though they're tracking everybody, people still manage to get around the security by getting fake eyes, by, even when they have telepaths that can predict murders, people are still able to get murdered, if you go to enough effort. And if you look, I never saw Looper, but, in that apparently the premise is that the mob actually has time travel. Of course, it's silly that they would then only use it to execute people and not any number of other things. But and then, of course, in Elysium, despite the totalitarian absolute security state, organized crime is still able to... I'm just switching hands because my hand's getting tired. is still able to basically get into Elysium and to have, to hack the system, to influence the system. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting is Elysium is depicted as possessing this technology, these basically beds that you lay in, and they will cure you of essentially anything. The way it's put forward is that if you have access to one of these, you will never die. As long as, if you die, if you're dead, before you get into one, it can't necessarily revive you, at least to a point. But any type of cancer, any type of radiation poisoning, any type of bone fracture. At one point, the villain has most of his face blown off, like literally blown off, and it just repairs it in 35 seconds. Oh, and I gotta say, the villain in this, the people who made this are the same people who made District 9. District 9 is a way better movie. And the guy who plays the person who turns into a prawn, I forget his name, he's a South African actor. He plays the villain in this. He's this guy, he's a cyborg basically. He's got all these, he's gonna have all this surgery done so he can be mechanically augmented with, augmentation suits and stuff. And there's one scene where he's cooking barbecue. He doesn't have a shirt on, but you can see all these implants. He's got this big oil container, and he's rotating the meat with a katana, and it was just a great scene. And that's the other thing people have commented on, though. He is a South African, and his group of his name is Kruger, and his group of mercenaries, who they're not even mercenaries, they work for Elysium, are just the vilest people in the entire movie, and that was kind of interesting. That is another liberal bias that, the worst thing that exists is racism, and so South Africans who are white are, of course, inherently racist still. So even though they're not depicted as racist per se in this, they're depicted as the villains. They fly around in a ship that's and I guess it is, since it can't go out into the beyond the Earth's atmosphere, I guess it's safe to say it is a spaceship. It has the Springbok painted on it, and it's got a South African flag right on it. So that's kind of one of the other, oh yeah, South Africans are racist. They're terrible. They don't say that they're racist. They're terrible. But anyway, so these healing beds can cure anything, and the people who live on Elysium essentially live forever, because even when they get old, these beds can repair them. And the kind of the goal becomes of the hero. They attain codes. There's a company that provides the robots for Elysium, and actually for the entire world. And this company is going bankrupt. But they have produced so much equipment that basically the entire government runs on their equipment. And the leader of Elysium decides to, I'm just giving away spoilers here, Jodie Foster, who is somehow the political head of Elysium, or an important person within the government of Elysium, is upset by the president of the Earth, who is also the president of Elysium. So Elysium is somehow a subunit of a political entity that encompasses the Earth, but has distinct citizenship for people who live in Elysium and people who don't live in Elysium. And he is too humanitarian, which, by the way, he's one of the only people on Elysium who is depicted who is not white. Everyone on Elysium is white. I think there's one point where I think one person looks like they might be the palest Asian you ever saw. The president is Indian, as in South Asian Indian. He is notably less racist than everyone else in Elysium. And so Jodie Foster decides that since he is less racist, that he needs to go. And so she approaches this company that, even though they're going bankrupt, their systems are so ubiquitous that they essentially have, and the phrase is used in the movie, the keys to the kingdom. They can do anything. They can, and what their plot eventually becomes is they can recalibrate it so that all the robots and everything consider all humanity to be citizens of Elysium, which seems highly implausible within the universe as proposed. But then So at the very end, they succeed, and they manage to get Elysium to reclassify all humanity as members of Elysium, and then these space, the space dock on Elysium is filled with these medical ships, each one of which is filled with medical droids and hundreds, it looks like, at least dozens of these miracle beds that can cure any disease in approximately 30 seconds or less. Anything, any ailment simultaneously. All right. So, and then of course these ships, they all fly down to Earth, and all these poor children start running to them and getting cured. And so this is the liberal conception of reality, where these unabashedly money-grubbing, absolutely care nothing about wealth and power white people who live on Elysium have sitting in their garage unutilized capital, because every single person on Elysium that's depicted has one of these devices in their house. Every house. In fact, when the people escape to Elysium, they assume that by breaking into any home, they can find one of these miracle beds. And as far as the movie is concerned, they accurately can. And yet, despite them having one in every single bed, they have hangar bays filled with hundreds more of these miracle devices, which is essentially what they are. And there is sort of an explanation here that, people from Elysium sometimes will go to Earth because they have business, or maybe they want to go on vacation or something. And if they get harmed on Earth, one of these spaceships will be dispatched to help them. So there's sort of a plausible reason for them existing, but then it doesn't explain why there's just so many of them. That they have this huge excess capacity. Now the people on Earth, they have money, not as much as the people from Elysium, and they have a demand for medical services. So these money-grubbing rich white people, why don't they just send these ships down to Earth and charge as much as as much as the market will bear to help people? They're not doing it because they're selfless. They're doing it because they can make money. It's just ridiculous that they would have all this stuff. Just see it, like literally, the equivalent would just be huge, because we don't have miracle beds, but just hospital after hospital after hospital just sitting there vacant. And the owners saying, yeah, I'm just going to leave it vacant. I'm not going to, even though there's a mass of billions and billions of people who have a demand, like everyone is depicted as being in need of medical care for one degree or another, but they won't use it. Despite the fact that they're money. How do these people become rich in the first place? How does this company that makes robots, how are they going out of business when they've got an unbelievably huge demand for medical services, and then just medical equipment that can solve all those problems easily, laying around idle, and so the kind of liberal mythology here is that, the problem with medical services, and medical services here are a stand-in basically for everything, I think, is if you just make everybody a citizen, if the government can just give it to everybody, then that's it. That's all it's going to take. And the only problem is these rich people, although even as it's depicted, there's some kind of political reason that's preventing this, I suppose a nice person in Elysium could say, I want to help a poor person, I'm going to invite them to my house and give them free access, but they can't do it because that person wouldn't be considered a citizen and the machines would not. It's funny, these miracle machines don't work for money. They only work based on a political designation. Are you a citizen or not? If you're a citizen, it's free. If you're not a citizen, it won't help you no matter what, even though it doesn't matter to the machine whether you're, so there's this, rich people are bad, but the reason that the medical care isn't available is clearly a political one. Sorry about the sun. It's just kind of, maybe politics is the problem. No, but politics isn't the problem. It's these greedy right, white rich people. White being a standard for, obviously, if you're white, you're rich. There are other cliches, like he works in a factory, and they treat all the workers horribly, and he basically receives a fatal dose of radiation because his boss makes him do something that's very dangerous. Yeah, I guess that could happen in capitalism. That could happen in, but that's the thing, though, is they're not living in capitalism. They're living in a totalitarian police state, and that still happens. The government, as far as we can tell, that exists on Earth and in Elysium is, a totalitarian police. They can do anything. It regulates everything. So this is kind of like the system that they want. They kind of recognize it as despotic, but then they kind of imply that the despotism has something to do with these white people having barbecues on their nice homes. So, I mean, wasn't particularly exciting. It has stuff speaking for it. The bad guy is pretty cool, even if he's a little crazy and a little implausible at times. Matt Damon is the messianic figure, essentially. He doesn't die with his arms outstretched, but other than that, it's pretty close. The organized crime, I like that part. I was waiting for that. I kind of, just by the previews, kind of realized there was going to be some kind of black market mafia organization that was going to have the wherewithal to surpass, the technocracy, which I like. That's good. But then the motivation of the crime lord initially is to become wealthy, but then it becomes to be egalitarian, and it happens like instantaneously. There's no explanation as to why he suddenly is motivated not by becoming rich, but from making everybody a citizen of Elysium. And then it's implied that this solves the entire problem. The only thing that had to change was a policy of the government. That's it. One tiny policy. And it's not like a policy like it abolishes itself, because that would be a good policy that would do it. But it's some positive. If it would just do one more thing, if it just enacted one more thing, this one little thing, then everything would be all right. That's the great liberal myth. That's the thing that animates their entire political being, which is why, of course, they're always against reducing the government. That's why they are so accepting and dismissive of government abuse, because ultimately they think the panacea for society is government. So when you talk, sure, they can recognize, that this or that is bad, but we have to have the government. It has to be big and powerful, because at the end of the day, if we wanted to do what Matt Damon does, it has to have that kind of power in the first place. So, sure, it has problems, but it is also the only solution to everything. So, you have to live with the problem. So what's wrong with that ideology is it's not the solution. And the costs of having it far outweigh even the perceived benefits, and the perceived benefits are an illusion. They don't exist. That's the other weird thing, is the robots in this apparently all come from this one company. So it's not even like this one company is basically has the ability to end all suffering on the planet, essentially. And yet what really needs to happen is a political redesignation. So anyway, that's what I thought. I'm not recommending or not recommending it. It was mildly entertaining. I went and saw Wolverine right afterwards, and I thought that between the two, they were about the same. But anyway, that's it.